Hi, good morning. Saturday morning. Welcome to That Saturday Show. It's great being back in the studio for at least 2 episodes in a row. This is episode 30. I think we're kind of nearing 100 episodes since last year during the insurrection when we started on January 6th. Of course, That Saturday Show is brought to you by the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice, located at 202 Harvard Southeast. We're a nonprofit organization founded in 1983. We focus on helping our community with resources and support. We also distribute food, participate in community events. Remember our Peace Cafe, open to the public, free food from 10 until 3 on Thursdays, and at 9 o'clock in our parking lots, free food distribution for the entire community. We use restorative justice instead of supporting the act of punitively placing people in jail. We are an anchor for frontline groups and leaders that work to disrupt and transform power for collective liberation. Now, that was written by our high school interns, and that's a little wordy, but that's kind of what we do. Going up against the war machine, going up against people that would deny climate change. And speaking of that, we have most of our program is dedicated to community solar, the Public Regulation Committee, and switching from fossil fuels to renewable energies in New Mexico. So you'll see Mariel, Nanasi, and John Farrell from Minnesota joining us to talk about that. The Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice strives to create a world where our collective needs are met sustainably and non-violently. Here's a couple announcements coming up. The most important one is tonight at 4 o'clock, September the 24th, is our memorial from 4 until 8 p.m. for the late great New Mexico activist Alan Cooper. I could go on forever about Alan Cooper. He used to be in my position back in 2012 and a number of years before that as the host for Indie Media right out of Studio 519 and quote unquote. He has worked twice at Wounded Knee. He's worked with the Black Panthers back in the day. He marched with John Lewis and Selma. Incredible activist. If you know Alan or if you know somebody who knows him, please remind them to come out to this event at the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice at our Peace Hall at 4 o'clock tonight. Our other announcement is tomorrow. Remember we had Calvin Kobayashi last week with the Japanese American Civilian League, and their fall festival is tomorrow starting about 10 until 5 o'clock at Veterans Memorial Park. With me is our music director, Matt John. You've seen him performing on the show a number of times. He's responsible for a lot of the local guests that we have on the show. And I'm going to toss it over to Matt to talk about what's coming up and open mic gigs that he performs at.
Thank you, Tom. So the open mics that I'm recommending starts off Sundays every week, 1 p.m. at it's a sober open mic for that sober socializing experience. Ancora Bakery Cafe, hosted by Charlie Crow from 1 to about 3:30 every Sunday. There is a small open mic that Dan the Glass Man is doing at ABQ Bite. That is on Central next to the Guild. I'm not certain, but I think it's about 5 p.m. There is a weekly open mic that's very popular that I encourage all you musicians to play. High and Dry Brewery. It starts at 5 p.m., but it's so popular that people show up at 4 p.m. to sign up. But it's a great festive event with a lot of people there every week to perform to. So if you're ready for a big audience, that might be a good place to go. It's hosted by Carl Peterson. Every Tuesday, Lizard Tail in Nob Hill has their open mic. I think it's at 7, but I am not certain. It might be at 8. Every Wednesday, Lizard Tail Industrial has their open mic, hosted by Felix Peralta. And I want to mention upcoming guest on October 8th on that Saturday show is guitarist, singer-songwriter Kathy Lydon. and I think she's going to bring some excellent music here to that Saturday show. Thank you, Tom.
All right. Thanks very much, Matt. And thanks, Matt. Speaking of music, the song coming up right after this is 17 by the local group The Advantage. And at the end of the program, in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, we're going to be showing local Laguna Acoma heavy metal band When Darkness Falls doing the song Rest the Day. Thank you, and we'll see you next week on that Saturday show.
Hey guys, we're The Advantage. Thanks for checking us out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye!
When did everything in life start making sense? You don't have to pull the trigger, I'm already dead.
So hi, back on that Saturday show. We're continuing part 2 of looking at utilities, P&M, San Juan generating plant that's thankfully closing on September the 30th. Now we're going to talk about what's going on with the PRC and community solar in general. We're very lucky to be joined again by Mariel and Nanasi of New Energy Economy. And our new guest joining us is John Farrell of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. John, apparently you're very adept on what's going on with community solar. Can you tell us all about it and what you do?
Yeah, I sure can. Thanks so much for having me. So community solar is, I like to think of it as serving kind of two different purposes. One is only about half of Americans, roughly, maybe a little less, have a sunny rooftop that they own that they could put solar on themselves. And plenty of people who even have access to a sunny rooftop they own don't have access to the money that would be required to put solar on their rooftop. And so the idea behind community solar is, what's a way to give people access to solar, to access to bill savings, ways to become more resilient, to have energy generation in their community. And that's the purpose of community solar. Now, there's a lot of different folks that will use the term community solar, and sometimes they won't mean the same thing. So I'll explain the way that we look at it. And I think folks who are looking to solve those same problems look at it. So it's not just a solar project that people can participate in. The idea behind community solar is one that really actually offers some substantial economic benefit or financial benefit for the participant. So it should help save them money on their energy bill. It should result in additional construction of solar energy. It shouldn't just be something that is carved out of an existing utility project. And it should be accessible to everybody, which means that people who maybe don't have a great credit score or people who don't have $5,000 to put in as a down payment should still be able to participate in it. And if you can check those boxes, then you've come pretty close to the idea of community solar. And it can be in a lot of different formats too. So it could be in Minnesota, for example, our state's law for community solar says that it can be a project located anywhere that's a megawatt or smaller. A megawatt's like the roof of a Walmart. And it can be in a field, it can be on a building, and you just have to live within one county of where that project is. So it doesn't have to be terribly close to you, but it has to be somewhat close to you. Rules for this vary by different states. Some folks do community-owned projects where they're actually really close by. Maybe it's on the rooftop of a church or a temple or something in your community or a school. But there's a lot of different flavors of it. And the idea is basically that, many people together can own and benefit from this community solar project. And that could be because they're part of a cooperative that collectively owns it. So they're each like member owners of this particular project. Or it sometimes can be that there's some third-party developer that built the project and folks subscribe to a share. And so they get a share of the bill savings. Some of the electricity from some of the panels on that project is deducted from their energy bill and reduces their energy bill. So there's a lot of different formats and flavors, but the basic idea is give people a way to get bill savings to participate in solar that wouldn't otherwise be able to. And in general, accelerate the deployment of solar all over the place so we can get more clean energy and lower greenhouse gas emissions and better economic benefits for our communities as quickly as possible.
What's your outlook about New Mexico, the potential for us? I know we have so much space that we could set up solar fields and power, 4 different states or something like that. What do you see going on in New Mexico? What are the strengths and what are we up against?
Well, I'll say this much. As someone who is from Minnesota and has followed our community solar program for a long time, you're at least 50% better in terms of your solar resource. You can kick our butts any day of the week, and I think that's pretty exciting. You do have some community solar legislation that passed, which really, I think, unlocks the opportunity to one of the unfortunately significant barriers to community solar has been that utility companies haven't been interested in allowing this kind of development to happen necessarily without some sort of enabling legislation. So generally speaking, community solar has to be enabled by some action of a legislature or a state regulator like a public service commission or public utility commission. And you have that. So you're past the biggest threshold is making it legal for people to have this kind of relationship, for folks to go pool their resources and go out and do community solar. And that's really exciting. I can also say from my own battle-scarred experience in Minnesota that just passing the law doesn't get you community solar right away. We had quite a delay in terms of months, even years, between the time that the legislation passed and the time that projects actually started producing electricity. I think it was probably almost 3 years. And in the interim, there was fights at the Regulatory Commission about what the rules would be like for the program. There was a lot of retrenchment by the utilities, kind of trying to reduce what the law had already said should happen. And then there was a lot of fighting and kicking and screaming when it was clear that there was going to be a lot of community solar on behalf of the utility, saying essentially, we didn't expect it to be this big. Help us. We don't want this much solar that we don't own. So there is more work to happen there. And I can talk a little bit more later about some of the nature of the ways that utilities can try to stall and delay community solar. But there's important work in that too, which is, coming up with what does the contract look like that a customer might sign? What are the standard terms and conditions and whatnot? So there's important work to be done there, but it also unfortunately does get political, just like the legislature when it comes to getting the program developed. But New Mexico has, incredible potential, basically the best solar resource in the country. And so community solar is going to, I hope, play a really important role in the replacement of dirty fossil fuel energy that you've been successfully turning offline and providing a lot of economic opportunity for communities across the state.
So let me get this straight. The Community Solar Act is basically window dressing without an enabling act?
Oh, no, the legislation is the enabling act that says this is going to happen, that this can happen. But there is a rule-making procedure then that happens after that, where the state has to basically write the very detailed, rules of the program that, are probably beyond, frankly, the scope and the knowledge of most legislators. Legislators set the direction and say, hey, this is a kind of program we want to have. And then they'll direct the, Regulatory Commission or the Public Service Commission to go out and say, okay, you write the specific rules that explain how will these projects plug into the grid. How long does the utility have to do that? How will participants in the project get billed for their participation? How will they receive the benefit? There's a lot of those details that often can't be spelled out in the legislation that have to be handled afterwards.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of it still has to go through the PRC, and we know from following it and the history of Avangrid that wants to try to merge with P&M that they don't look that favorably at solar. And I'm sure there's all sorts of obstacles and people pushing against this. And I guess when we're talking about the PRC, I guess I've heard that that legislation passed to allow the governor to appoint members of the PRC rather than them being elected from the community at large, right? And there's 3 Native American groups that are petitioning very hard against this at this point. I guess they're the New Mexico Social Justice Equity Institute, 3 Sisters Collective, and the Indigenous Lifeways.
Yeah, that is definitely happening. There's a challenge to whether the PRC, the question on the ballot was transparent or misleading. And in our state, we believe that there should be transparency and honesty when there is something that is put forth to the voters so that they know what they're voting on. And unfortunately, the election, the question that was on the ballot that people voted on was, hey, do you want a professional PRC? Well, I do, don't you? And what wasn't spelled out was that our constitutional right that we delegated to ourselves to vote for PRC commissioners was being taken away. And that's the question in that lawsuit. That's not being brought by New Energy Economy. But these are related issues because, it underscores the importance of the Public Regulation Commission as central to our economy, because energy is central to our economy. And one of the issues is, like, back to community solar, is that John Farrell has laid out so beautifully, is that community solar gives people the power to invest in solar beyond rooftop solar. And, you know, one of the big problems is that the utilities have been slow walking this transition. They've known that we're in need of this transition to move away from fossil fuels as quickly as absolutely possible and towards renewables. And, you know, some of this information actually is coming out in these hearings that are happening in Congress right now to determine what are the different games that the utilities and the energy companies have been playing for the last 50 years to prevent that transition. Because, hey, once you put solar on your rooftop, once you put a wind turbine up, all you need is the wind to blow, and all you need is the sun to shine. And in New Mexico, as John said, we are blessed with incredible resources, some of the best resources, not only in the United States, but in the world. And so we want access to those resources, and we want to be able to put people in charge of them. And that is what really is at the heart of the utilities fight. First fight against community solar in the legislature, then fight within the legislature to get a decent law passed, which was enormously difficult. But then even when we got not the best, but a good community solar law passed, it said what John said, which is, it said, hey, PRC, now make rules about all sorts of the details. And unfortunately, then at the PRC, the Public Regulation Commission in New Mexico, the utilities again put up months and months of obfuscation and of questioning of rulemaking and saying, oh, all these kinds of things like those people out there are going to just take advantage of people who want solar, you know, as if the utilities didn't take advantage of their customers. But anyway, we finally got a rule passed. And then they are not only appealing the rulemaking to the Supreme Court, so this time as if SPS, Southwest Public Service, one of the investor-owned utilities, along with El Paso Electric and Public Service Company of New Mexico, PNM, have all appealed the rule, but they did something else. They said, hey, they asked for a motion for a stay of the rule. So that's even worse than just an appeal. That's saying we want to thwart the legislature's intention to have this rulemaking proceed. And so they have appealed and they asked for a stay of the rule. And the PRC responded, New Energy Economy responded, and a number of other entities responded and said, hey, this is not another game, another barrier that they're throwing up to prevent the teeniest bit of incursion into public power, into allowing people to control their energy decisions.
I have a kind of an off-center question for you. This probably will quell or reinforce a lot of these rumors out there. Is there a certain amount of energy that is going out of the state? There's been rumors of like Chinese solar farms and other countries and maybe little solar endeavors going off to other utilities in other states.
From New Mexico?
Yeah.
I mean, Avangrid is here already and has 2 wind farms, and they're selling it out of state. I don't know about Chinese companies. So there is some of that happening already. PNM is not buying any of that wind energy. Why? Because it's so cheap. And there, for people to understand, it's complicated, but the real reason that the utilities haven't moved to solar and wind energy is not because they're ideologically opposed to solar and wind. It's because they don't make as much money on solar and wind, because once you pay for it, first of all, it's guaranteed sometimes between 25 and 40 years. What do we have in our life that's guaranteed for that long of a period of time? Nothing. So that's one thing. It's guaranteed. And second of all, once you pay for it, once you put that solar on your rooftop, or once you invest in community solar, and you buy a share, the energy is free. What a concept. And so that's the reason that these utilities have been slow walking the transition. That's the reason they're coming up with, false solutions like hydrogen, that and carbon capture and sequestration and all this, nonsense, really. We know what we have to do. We have to transition to solar and wind as quickly as possible. And we also know that the people who have caused the climate crisis, the energy companies, the wealthiest corporations on the planet that have undermined our democracy, are keeping us from making the transition that we need to survive. That's what this is about.
Right. Wow. So a lot of stuff is going on. A lot of work has been being done with the PRC and the court. Is the PRC overwhelmed with the amount of work that they'd have to do if this went through? And how can the community help in any way? Can we put pressure on certain legislators? Can we work with the PRC? What can we do?
Well, thank you for that question. I think that the first thing is that, yes, it's really important for people to write in, letters and speak on programs like yours to get the word out about what's happening. So, of course, education. We have an answer to these woes, and these energy companies are standing in the way. So that's what needs to get out there and needs to be told. Just so you have an idea, when after the legislation was passed, the economic activity, the interest from both within New Mexico and outside of New Mexico to actually participate in the rulemaking for community solar and then also develop community solar was enormous. No such activity, economic activity has happened at this level for clean energy in the history of New Mexico. And so that's what the situation is. It's like the utilities are trying to close the door, and these, even with just a tiny little rule that we have, which only allows 200 megawatts in 2 years, there's a flood of interest. And that's what would be cut off if this rulemaking was essentially halted by the Supreme Court. So I think that it's important to talk about that it's economic activity, and just for the reasons John said before, it's about putting the power of the and the resilience for New Mexicans back into community, as opposed to these big energy giants. And that's what's at stake. And that's what their resistance, that's what the utilities resistance is. And that's what we need to implement. And so I think education and being on programs such as yours and writing in the paper about wanting community solar, those are things that the public definitely should be involved in and active on.
So I sort of have an ignorant question. I know the answer to this, but with the Four Corners plant being shut down, where exactly are we getting most of our energy from nuclear?
Well, it's not shut down yet. It will be shut down in 10 days. And most of our energy will then be from nuclear at the Palo Verde nuclear generating station in Arizona. Unfortunately, 30% of our energy, if you're in P&M territory, comes from there. Then the next greatest amount is gas. And there's still coal left on P&M's portfolio, and about 12 or 14% solar and about 9% wind. We want to up the renewables dramatically, and we could if P&M wasn't stopping us from doing so. And so that's what we need to, break open that door and allow community solar to thrive.
Well, yeah, we're starting to wind down. Thank you, guys. This is a great interview. Do you get John or Mariel, do you want to add something? Are there certain directions you're going in other environmental endeavors, or how are you getting big pushbacks from oil and gas lobbyists? I mean, what does the future hold for you guys?
Well, I was going to ask if John could share like some of the other ways, the nifty ways that the utilities have concocted to continue to prevent action on meeting our renewable energy, the necessity of our renewable energy transition.
Oh, great. We have about 5 minutes left.
All right. I will endeavor to do so quickly, although it's quite a laundry list. I mean, the key is, and I've written about this in Minnesota and the pushback that we've gotten from Excel Energy, which is our investor-owned utility that facilitates or that oversees the community implementation of the community solar program, is that if they were able to build the community solar themselves, it would be hundreds of millions of dollars in profits for their shareholders. And so the big issue for them has always been that who owns the resource. And they have been happy to build utility scale solar. In fact, they just picked their own bid for a utility scale solar project, where there was a bid of the three or four different companies that got to the final part of the bid, and Excel picked their own bid. So congratulations to them and their shareholders for that selection. And what we see in contrast is in the implementation of community solar, for example, they were fined by our state regulators $1 million for slow walking the interconnection of community solar projects, an amount which is somewhat like 1/100th of their annual revenue. So just to give you an example of how feeble a slap on the wrist it was. And it has potentially big benefits for them, of course, because the slower they make community solar go, the more opportunity there is for utility owned stuff, transmission, solar, that kind of thing. And they also played a lot of games in the process of development of the community solar program rules. So our legislation did not specify a cap for how much solar could be produced under the community solar program. And Excel said that we should have a 10 megawatt per year cap. So, 10 Walmarts, right? Not a whole lot of solar, frankly, especially in the hundreds of megawatts or thousands of megawatts that constitutes their grid system. They were shot down because there was no legal basis for it. And fortunately, we had a commission that was willing to stand up for the law. But there's just a couple of ways. We have ongoing fights with them as well about the level of compensation for community solar. They love to talk about how their stuff it is more cost effective, even though it's not true. They don't count the cost of delivering their energy when they do that comparison. So they actually, even though they, on the one hand, with their marketing team, will tout their community solar to ordinary citizens, when they are lobbying, they will tell legislators that it's a terribly expensive program that they can't possibly manage to keep around. So there's a lot of those kinds of shenanigans going on with community solar. And it really just comes down to, frankly, the very rational and logical decision that their management makes, which is to say, we should oppose this stuff because we can't make as much money on it. And as long as we have utilities who get their benefit from maximizing profit by owning things, then we're going to get this kind of behavior, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, you guys want to add anything, or have we pretty much concluded?
On community solar, I think we nailed it.
Okay. Any other issues that the community should be aware of coming up in the future? Anything coming up in this upcoming legislative session? This is the long session, right?
This is the long session. I will share one thing that I just filed on behalf of New Energy Economy in the PRC that I'm pretty excited about. And you can all go read Hannah Grover's newest piece in the New Mexico Political Report, because she wrote about it. And that is that we have filed a motion for a rule for an order to show cause why PNM and Avangrid shouldn't be held accountable for false and misleading advertising. And it's based on the fact that the PRC rejected the merger as contrary to the public interest for a shopping list of important consumer protection reasons. And yet PNM and Avangrid are engaged in misleading and false advertising, saying that they are one company. Or that's what they're saying, by innuendo. Like they'll say, featured sponsor, not sponsors, and it's PNM and Avangrid and their logos. So we just filed that, and we look forward to seeing what the PRC will do with it. And essentially, it's unfair advertising and business practices, contrary to their order that said, no, you can't merge, and this is supposed to be a regulatory authority over a regulated entity, and they're acting like they can do whatever they want. So we've just filed that, and we'll see where that goes. In terms of next legislative session, we're hoping to have a bill about creating public power. And so hopefully we'll be on again with you, Tom, to discuss more about that as the legislation gets filed.
Very good. John, if people want to know more about you and the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and Community Solar in general, do you have a way that we can contact you?
Yeah, well, my contact information and a whole bunch of free resources are on our website, ilsr.org. And I should just add, for people interested in public power, we're in the middle of doing a 6-part, maybe 7-part podcast series about public power. Just had a great episode talking about the key ingredients that communities need in order to be successful. And there is some stuff that states can do to make it easier for communities to exercise that right. So very exciting to hear about that work in New Mexico, and would love if people are interested for them to check out the podcast. It's called Local Energy Rules.
Great. Yeah, definitely.
What is it called?
Local Energy Rules is our podcast name.
Local Energy Rules. Okay. We'll try to get a graphic of that up. Thank you very much for taking your time and coming to us from way out in Minnesota. Is that right? And Mariel, thanks for showing up again, and thanks again for all the hard work you do and trying to follow this back and forth. I mean, I look at half of the paperwork you send me, and my head just starts spinning. I don't know how it is for the regular person out there, but I'm glad people are really following this and are on the ball and are looking out for the public interest.
Thank you for having us, and people can go to newenergyeconomy.org for more information. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks so much. Great to meet you.
Have a good day.
Start whenever you're ready. That is going on the video. You know it.
The Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice has been serving the communities of Albuquerque for nearly 40 years. Peace and justice are the motivators for the work we do, in concert with dozens of other organizations and committees here and around the country. Whether the issue is nuclear weapons, or police brutality and murders, or homelessness and hunger, or even climate justice, immigration, and prisons, the Center continues to stand shoulder to shoulder with community organizations dedicated to doing the good work, the necessary work. But we can't do it without your help. COVID didn't take a break, and we didn't either. And the financial cost of being strong advocates and providing assistance have not diminished. You can help us by becoming a member of the Peace and Justice Center for $40, or simply make a donation. You can also stop by the center and maybe purchase one of our popular yard signs to let your neighbors know where you stand on important social justice matters. We need you. Get in touch at www.abqpeaceandjustice.org or call us at 505-268-9557. Thank you for your support, and thank you for standing up for peace and justice.
Until the next time, it's time to say goodbye. When you out here in the streets, keep it real, 505. We love everybody, we just want to let you know. Thanks for tuning in to that Saturday show.